You were in charge of the Obama-Biden transition team at the State Department. Is the State Department of the Secretary of State anything like the previous 10 State Departments back to Truman and World War II?
Well, I don't know that. I think that not only is the State Department not like the State Departments back to World War II, but the foreign policy apparatus in general and the approach of the president is a very sharp departure from the approach to American foreign policy really since the war.
Does that change the dialogue between Congress and the president because there isn't a State Department to manage the message?
I think that the approach the president takes to making these decisions and his unorthodox communication approach really does cause a gulf between himself and Congress. And it does beg the question here, what's the strategy here? There really hasn't been kind of a full explanation of what the president's approach is in the Middle East in general and what the approach is going forward here with respect to Iran. That really is the question, as you and Ian were discussing earlier. The core question here is, where does this go? What was the purpose of this? Of the attack, not necessarily the justice, by the way, of whether Solemani deserved his fate, and he certainly did at the end of the day here. But the question is, what does it mean for the United States? So yes, Tom, we have a very different approach to foreign policy, a very different approach to communicating foreign policy, and a different approach to relations with Congress, no doubt.
Mr. Donilon, let me bring in my colleague in London, Francine Lacroix. Francine?
Yeah, Mr. Donilon, what would you describe as President Trump's strategy in the Middle East today?
It's interesting. That's a really good question. The president had articulated a strategy of trying to pull back from the Middle East, if you will. But the moves he makes here obviously show us becoming more deeply enmeshed in the Middle East. The president ran in 2016 on a platform of ending the endless wars in the Middle East, and he has, through a variety of decisions that he's made over the course of his presidency, indicated a desire to pull back. But this has us really kind of pushing in to the Middle East, and it's not really clear where it leads. And the real question, in addition to, isn't it contrary to the stated strategy of the United States, which, by the way, formally had been to pull back from the Middle East and to engage, as Ian has written about, engage more in the great power competition with Russia and China. Where does that fit in that overall strategy? It seems to be contradictory, number one. And number two, with respect to the key interests in the Middle East, how is this advancing our key interests, particularly in terms of fighting ISIS, which was number one key interest, in terms of protecting the United States and our allies against terrorism, and number two, the nuclear deal, which now seems to be really kind of collapsing under the pressure of the action of last Friday.